welcome back. It's now 7 minutes away from 7 o'clock, and as promised before the break, we're sitting down to talk about shark kills in UNESCO World Heritage Sites and exactly what it means given the images that we've seen on Facebook. And joining us for this conversation, we have the Educational and Outreach Coordinator for MarAliance, Cecilia Guerrero. We have the Treasurer of the Belize Game Fish Association, Dufe Nunez, and we have the Vice President of Oceana, Belize, Janelle Chanona. Good morning,
Good morning.
and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Of course, yesterday, if you have a Facebook account, the images of the sharks on the beach were just, arresting. And it sparked a lot of conversation. So we want to start off first by just talking about your impressions when you saw the images, your gut reaction.
Well, I think as a credit to what the entire local scene has been displaying, that these creatures are definitely seen as charismatic creatures. And it was good and bad that the sharks had to die to bring out this level of public outcry, because through our documentary where the fishermen are talking about gill nets, we evoked emotion. When MarAliance posted the photos that went up yesterday, you saw that outcry of emotion to the point where people were even thinking, these people need to be arrested, they're doing something illegal. It's like, well, no. But I think it's very indicative of where we are in terms of consciousness. People are aware that these apex predators are keystone species, and if we lose the sharks, that's foretelling for what we can expect in the future. So I think it was as tough as it was to see different parts of sharks scattered over the beach and in amongst the plastic on the shore. I think everything needs a catalyst, and this is one more catalyst to making sure that this issue gets addressed. Fishermen have been talking about the use of gill nets, especially as it goes to harvesting sharks, since 1997 and probably before, but that's the earliest documentations we have. So it's, it's good that it's out in the light, and this needs to be exposed. This is one incident, one weekend in one spot. Dufi can probably attest as a fisherman to being out there and seeing more like this. So
this is not uncommon.
No,
and what was your reaction?
I think it highlights a couple of things. First of all, it highlights the fact that people are still killing sharks right now. And from all research, all indications, everything points to how important sharks, the role sharks play in our ecosystems and on our reefs. And secondly, what it points out is the damage that these gill nets can do, because this wasn't one shark. This was about 30 sharks, and in one incident, in one case. So imagine the amount of sharks that are being killed out there. This happened on a national monument, but it's also been happening throughout the country, north to south. So it's a shame that it had to happen this way for people to react the way that they did. But the good thing is that we're seeing a lot of people agitated about it. They're concerned about it, and they're mad about it. So that's a good that came out of that.
And Cecilia?
Yes, well, I think the images speak for themselves. This, of course, as everyone else has been saying, it's not something that we've only just been seeing, but it's something that we've been documenting for several years now. In 2013, we had a case at Robinson Point, and we actually have images. If you do a quick search online and look through our Belize Shark Project Facebook page, you're going to see images from 2013, very similar to these, where hundreds of sharks were killed during a week time. And as we've been saying over and over, this is something that happened in one day. 32, almost 50 sharks being killed. And we have more images that we, of course, were not able to post online, but we have more images where you can see many species, many important species of sharks being killed, species that are protected internationally, such as the hammerhead shark, that are endangered and are protected by CITES. Now, the response that we've been receiving through our Facebook page has been very it's been very overwhelming because we've been receiving a lot of calls to our office, a lot of Facebook messages, a lot of emails, and it really moves us to see that people are being very aware and very conscious of what's going on, and we see that they actually care about these animals, and that's exactly one of our objectives, to have people become more aware of the importance that these animals have for our marine ecosystem, for our reef, because we're highly dependent on the barrier reef for tourism. And if we don't have these animals in our waters, then we won't have a resilient reef, we won't have a healthy reef, and many people won't have jobs. So we're very glad that these images or this post, this information managed to open people's eyes as to reality of our country.
Now, there are a number of issues wrapped up in this in one. Yes. Obviously, just the images of the shark themselves. But let's talk about that. Is it illegal to fish for sharks?
Shark licenses are issued. So you have to have a license to fish a shark, but you can fish a shark. And technically, you're not supposed to catch whale sharks and nurse sharks. But we've seen documentation as recent as last year. I was at a fish market here in Belize City, and there was a juvenile nurse shark finned and meat displayed for sale. So it's happening. And I think across the country, when we've talked with fishermen, the issue comes down to monitoring and enforcement. And it also comes down to an illegal fishing issue because, again, of lack of enforcement and monitoring, where fishermen are saying primarily, not to say no Belizean is using a gill net, but primarily this is not being used by Belizean fishermen in Belizean waters, but it's affecting Belizean fishermen because, as Cecilia and Dufy are saying, if we don't have a resilient reef, we can't have a viable fishing industry, and that means Belizean fishermen out of a job. We have about 15,000 people dependent on fishing as a livelihood. If that goes away, what is the alternative? So this really, as you said, it's dynamic and there are several moving parts, but the bottom line is the fishermen themselves are seeing the impact of what these nets, this specific gear. So this is not about falling in love with the sharks and the sharks come first. At the end, this comes back to people. If the sharks are not there, in the end, because of we all did the food chain in school, this comes back to us. So this is about management and this is about sustainability. And the fishermen are saying, we've seen where this particular gear is having serious impact on the ecosystem that we depend on for our livelihood. We need to get rid of this gear.
We know there has been advocacy to talk about banning the nets. Where are we with that?
Well, I can speak. I know we've met with Fidel Adenet, who organized a petition as far away as 1997, asking the then Minister of Fisheries to please ban these nets because they were seeing, and this is in southern Belize, they were seeing where they were going out and getting less. 1997. If you can fast forward, and we know what's happening now in terms of general fishery, you go to the market, you see the fish getting smaller and smaller and the price getting higher and higher. So this is purely organic from the fishermen, and across the world this happens where the fishermen, they know what they used to get. They can tell you the stories where they catch 100 fish before 6 o'clock in the morning. Now they're lucky if they could catch 100 fish aggregate in a month or a week. So this is really, it comes back to the fishermen and our support for the fishermen. And it also comes back to the fact that we've seen where economically, non-consumptive use, MarAliance uses the tagline, worth more alive than dead. So it's really game fish bringing in approximately $200 million into the economy. So this is not environmentalists, tree huggers going off on a tangent. This is saying, look at all these facts, look at all these dollar bills involved, look at sustainability, look at everything that we're seeing from the region in terms of what gill nets have done to other fisheries, and let's make an informed decision.
So when you see the remains of the shark, for people who don't understand, when you have images like this, what does it really point to? Why you have so much remnants of the shark actually on the beaches?
Well, I mean, definitely, William, you have to look culturally. Fish goes up in terms of demand this time of the year because of Lent. And you have to realize that a lot of Belizean products are being extracted for the regional markets. So from what we've seen, and I don't know if the others, there is not a huge demand for shark meat products or shark products locally, but there's significant demand and good price points across the border. So this is to feed, this is the Robinson Point scene that Cecilia was describing, but we've seen where it is harvesting sharks here, but not for consumption here. Where we see the benefit of sharks in Belize is tourists coming in, paying to go swim with them at Oceana, and you know, had a whale of a time, you know, and enjoying it and seeing that. And we benefit, of course, because as keystone species, sharks help to maintain the balance of the ecosystem. If there's no sharks, then you see a blow up of other species, everything kind of goes out of whack, and we lose the beauty and abundance that we're seeing in the reef. But I don't know if you guys want to touch on that.
Yeah, but it's very important to mention that it's not only Hull Chan Marine Reserve that is highly dependent on tourism for shark tourism, but it's also Keycocker Marine Reserve. They have their own shark rally, Lighthouse Reef. We have a lot of tourists that are going out to the beautiful blue hole, and they're expecting to see sharks and also rays. And actually, curiously enough, we've had reports that since the beginning of this year, and we all know that we're at high tourist season from December till about August. What is August exactly? We're in high tourist season, and to date, we've received reports that there have not been sightings of sharks at Blue Hole. So. There are certain areas in Belize throughout the entire length of the barrier reef where we have protected areas that there are encounters of sharks and rays that are important for tourism throughout the entire coast. And if we continue to see these sort of actions whereby our sharks are taken out from World Heritage sites, then we will eventually have a problem, because these animals, they don't reproduce as quickly as we would like them to. They only have one pup per individual, and if we are killing them at where they're juveniles and they've not reached the age of maturity, then in the future, in a couple of years, there won't be adults to reproduce, and we won't have juveniles, we won't have pups, we won't have a population of sharks in these areas, which, of course, as we've been mentioning over and over, they're important for the tourism sector, they're important for the resilience of the reef, and it's important to note that it's not only the tour guides that are benefiting from these tours going out to the reef or going out to these specific locations, but it's also hotels, restaurants. There's so many jobs linked to tourism. We're highly dependent on tourism, that if we lose our sharks, then the revenue in the country will just completely go down.
Now, when you're looking at these issues and you have the public outcry, what can people realistically do? Because we don't have necessarily a culture where we'll have people individually or, you know, banding together to actually lobby parliamentarians or anything of that sort. So what can people realistically do at this juncture?
I think it's important, first and foremost, for people to get informed. So even if you don't have that immediate reaction to call up and, you know, go off on your talk show or whatever the case may be, but get informed so that you can speak from a position of knowledge regarding why I need to care about this. And I've always maintained that's one of the biggest why. Why does this matter to me? How does this affect me? And this does. So figuring out to yourself, whether it's through tourism, whether it's through fishing, whether it's just you as a Belizean and what tourism is to this country. Biggest GDP earner, 25% of our jobs are tourism related. That's huge. If tourism in there, I don't even want to think about repercussions for Belize. But the second thing is, William, if you care, then you need to stand up for it. These creatures can't speak for themselves, the reef can't defend itself, and this is across the board, not just with this issue. It's also about Belizean livelihoods. We talk about Belizean pride, we need to act on it as well. If fishermen can't fish again, that's a day that that's like telling a farmer he can't farm. That's telling you can't do yoga. It's really part of who we are. We have to make sure that we can stand up for others, because again, there are all ripple effects. We know it's very small. This place that we call home is very small, and we need to band together on this. And lastly, really to encourage people, write in, say something, post something, do something. MarAliance has started a petition on change.org. The link is on several Facebook pages as well. That's a letter telling the Ministry of Fisheries, please look at this issue. Please look at the use of gillnets. Please look at what this is doing on an ecosystem. I know the minister is brand new. We've had meetings with him. He is looking at this issue. They're looking at putting together some type of forum to talk about this issue. That is the way forward. We have to be talking about this. This can't be something that just the people immediately connected to the circle are talking about. We have to, everybody in this room, everybody outside this room has to be knowledgeable in what this can mean, because at the end of the day, by the time it gets to you and you realize, oh my goodness, you mean all the way, it's too late. Now is when we have to talk about this.
Yes, and as Janelle was saying, I do encourage everyone to get more information, be more informed. Only through education and only through knowledge will we be able to protect what we want to protect. And as again, Janelle was saying, we have on our Facebook page, we have a link to change.org, whereby you can petition. We're petitioning for the Honorable Gaspar Vega to make a change in legislation and to ban gill nets. We work with many organizations, partner organizations, such as Oceana, such as the Belize Game Fishing Association, many NGOs throughout the country. If you want more information, the information is there. You can go to your closest NGO, you can go online, just make sure that you are informed of what's happening.
One of the good things about right now, as opposed to maybe in '97 when this push started, was that now we have social media. We're talking about Facebook, we're talking about posting videos and pictures so people can really see. I can sit down here and tell you scenarios and stories all day, but the fact of the matter is, if you're not seeing it, then you might not, you might not have that emotion that these images bring out. And I think that's the difference that we're seeing right now. And I think that we're getting good feedback from most Belizeans, a lot of Belizeans, and it's encouraging for us.
Now, I want to raise something, because obviously we've been talking about banning gill nets for quite some time. But you're talking about illegal fishing by neighboring fishermen. So that speaks to another issue. It's not only banning it, but who will actually police? Because we've had issues with, the illegales coming over to actually do all of this. And even in this situation, it's not clear if there are Belizeans.
Yeah. Well,
right?
The fishermen are saying that it will be easier to police if you know right away, the minute you see a gill net involved, it's illegal. Because now you have a scenario where the nets is supposed to be registered, the person is supposed to be registered, so there's a whole process of figuring out, is this person supposed to be here? Is this the gear they're supposed to have? Whereas if you know right off, a tank and a spear, a gun and a grouper means no. Right off, if you see a gill net, it's not supposed to happen, then yes, that will make an easier point of policing this issue. And I think it's also about being able to galvanize this kind of outcry, this kind of sentiment, so that, and I have to say, it's almost tangible, this sort of moral associations with using this gear, where, some people will be like, yeah, I used to use it, but I don't use it anymore. There's this this association, because they see it, and
Well, let's delve a little bit deeper into the dangers of gill net fishing in terms of the wider ecosystem. Why is it such a no-no?
It's just an indiscriminate gear. If you look at it, William, they're called walls of death. That's not to be exaggeratory. They basically, it's whoever.
Based on the size.
Well, not even. You can swim up into the net and you can be a manatee, you can be a turtle, you can be a bonefish, you can be a snapper, you can be a shark, and you get tangled up in this net and you drown and you die.
As you can see in the image.
So, and it gets caught up on the corals. Sometimes the net becomes unlodged and it drifts, and that's called a drift ghost gill net, because then it just continues to catch and kill, and nobody claims it, and then again it gets tangled up on the reef and it's causing more damage. So it's an indiscriminate gear there, unless you're using a gill net in a spawning aggregation where there's one type of fish kind of going around in a circle. There's no guarantee what you would get. And it's also how we fish. So they go out, there's an example of nets on the reef. So you have this scenario where you go out, you set the net, and basically you come back in, and then by the time you go back out to get it, it's already, whatever is in the net has already died, which was the case of the scalloped hammerhead last February in Hopkins, where the fisherman set his net, and by the time he went out, this thing had caught itself in the net and died. So there's no, you bring up a fish on a hook and line or a rod and reel, oh wow, this is a great fish, but catch and release because I know this shark is protected, or this type of fish is protected. With a gill net, you don't have that option. And what happens? Because it's not what they're originally after, more often than not, it's bycatch. It's just wasted fish. And again, we see where people will come, and Dufy can attest to this, people will come to Belize from South Africa, from Australia, to land a bonefish tarpon and permit in Belize. Talking thousands of dollars. The bonefish school runs into a gill net, all that money gone, just because of one net set inappropriately. And we've seen it already in Bahamas. I don't know if you want to...
Yeah, there's legislation in Bahamas that prevents setting gill nets, and their fish population has been booming. And if Belize were to do the same, I don't see why it couldn't. And right now we're talking about permit bonefish and tarpon and sharks, but really snook, cobera, anything that swims in our rivers and around in our seas and in our reef, around the reef, is subject to being killed by gill nets. There's so much damage, there's so much negatives, and I can't think of really any positives right now for having these gill nets around still. It's an archaic type of fishing. We've long since moved past gill netting in the world today. So I don't see why a modern Belize needs gill nets.
It's also very important to note that these nets are not only set out at sea, but they're used in rivers, they're used in mangrove areas, they're used in lagoons, and some of these areas are important critical habitats. They're nursery sites, like for example the mangroves. And what that means by nursery sites is that we have juvenile fish, or we have sharks that actually go to these sites and they have their pups. And if we have these gill nets in these critical habitats, then they're also being affected by these nets. These animals don't even have the chance to reach to the age of maturity or the age of adulthood in order for them to reproduce. So these nets are very, very detrimental to our ecosystem, to our fisheries, and just on a whole to Belize itself.
Now, as I said before, you have quite a number of issues here lumped into one, and we've seen the videos talking about gill nets in particular, and you have various people speaking out. How can you broaden this conversation to make it, more, I don't want to say palatable, because no pun intended, but so that people can have it in bite-sized chunks that really resonate with people, to actually bring pressure to bear, because we've been having this conversation for quite some time. And we see even globally that, there are now some places where they're talking about using technology to better deal with gill nets, etc. Where are we in terms of how can we get people to actually understand this, and not just let this be another 9-day kind of frenzy that is so typical of what we do in Belize? Everybody's upset, and then you go back to life as usual, or you find something else to actually talk about.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody else wants.
Well, throughout the years, we have several outreach campaigns, educational campaigns, where we've been trying to educate not only the general public, but also our stakeholders. We work closely with fishermen. We work closely with the tourism industry. Again, as I said, we have educational programs. We're trying to educate primary school kids about the importance of the marine environment, notably sharks and rays, and the use of sustainable gear such as handline and the present use of unsustainable fishing gear such as gill nets. So through the years, we've been trying to educate people and create awareness through the use of several different strategies. And I think it's important to note that in about 2 weeks, we'll be having the National Reef Week, and I would suggest that people come along. We're having a week-long event with several organizations throughout the entire country, so it's just Oceana, and we'll be having more information on this available, because I think it's very important that, as you said, we don't leave it only for 9 days, for the next 9 days, but we continue to push and to create awareness and to move people into making a change.
And I think, William, it's really important that this becomes, as I said, localized to you. Whether you consume seafood or you don't, what happens in terms of the management of our fisheries will affect us. And we are not talking about stopping people from fishing. It is just looking at alternative gear. Many of the fishermen, as I said, that have been using this gill net gear are already doing it voluntarily. They need to be supported in policy. There needs to be an implement of fairness involved. You know, here is a handful of fishermen using sustainable gear, and then there's one guy using a gill net that's hurting everybody. There has to be a balance on this. I think fishermen have, and they've told that they have workshop fatigue, they have consultation fatigue. Now is the time for action. They are doing it. Chefs, as you know, through our Fish Right, Eat Right program, chefs and tour companies and hotels are already backing them, saying, look, we see where travelers are discernible. They want to know what they're doing, the tour they're taking, the food they're eating, the place they're staying is sustainable. We want to support that effort, and this has to be about action. We've been talking about this too long, and you know, this is going to be one of those issues where you'd hate to be, yeah, I'm telling us so, because at the end, all of us hurts. There's no plan B for Belize. We have to manage what we have today, and this is about action. So whether it's getting information, taking a position, writing something on Facebook, writing to the editor of your newspaper, writing to the minister, writing to the fisheries administrator, but take a position on this, because this will affect you.
Yeah,
and support your fishermen.
Yeah, I don't think anything evokes more sentiment, or very few things in Belize evoke more sentiment than our reef. I think that a lot of Belizeans, young or old, are very passionate about the reef, and I think that we need to start to link it to them and to say, listen, killing out sharks indiscriminately, killing out the species of fishes the way we are doing it right now using gill nets is not sustainable, and this is going to mean that eventually, and very shortly, these things happen in very short amount of time, very shortly we might not have a reef, and you can be that dramatic and say that the damage that we're doing right now might be irreparable. In my time, in 33 years that I've been fishing, or maybe 20 out of the 33 years that I've been fishing, I've seen, nobody has to tell me, I've seen the decrease in the amount of fish that we've been catching. And over time, it's been getting less and less. And if you talk to the recreational fisherman and you talk to the commercial fisherman, the story is basically the same. So we know that something is happening, and we know that a ban on gill nets, although it might not be the only thing that we need to do, is a big step in the right direction.
So,
I always get cold seed when fishermen talk like that, because I mean it's really true.
And why do we continue to exist then in a bubble almost? Given the fact that we see these declining numbers, we know the impact that it can possibly have on our overall economy, that we're not moved necessarily to action.
I'd like to think, William, that it's not intentional. It's just we get caught up in our own little bubble, our own routine, homeschool work, and we're trying to just snip it here. Maybe I catch the news one day, maybe I get to read it one day. I think, like crime, until it actually physically touches you, then you realize there's this huge, other scenario playing out. So, I mean, that's really the point of what we're doing, what we will be doing as part of Reef Week, what we continue to do for the rest of the year as conservationists, of really trying to bring that message home to every single Belizean. We are a nature-based economy. We are a reef-loving people. We genuinely care about our resources. It's literally just to tap it. And how I know it's not intentional, the minute you give somebody that information, you let them hear what the fishermen are saying, you show them what the shark is, instant champion. They have that information, they know it, they act on it, they want to do something. As Doofy said, it's not the only thing we're gonna have to do. We have to look at finding alternatives. That has to come from the fishermen. We can't do a top-down approach to say, yeah, you must start doing this. It has to be a two-way street. It also has to look at, again, the overall picture of what we need to do in terms of other management. How do we support enforcement? Technology is available. We can use GPS trackers on our phones. We can take pictures. We can upload immediately. There's all these platforms for vessel monitoring and tracking and monitoring. We have the resources at our disposal, but until there's that public outcry, political will, knowledge and enforcement, all of that has to come together for there to be change. But there has to be change. That's the key underlying. There has to be change.
And there really and truly needs to be change, because we've been seeing, if we continue to see these animals being killed like this, then a perfect example of what extinction would be is the sawfish. Now in northern Belize, for example, around the Sartineja Corozal area, we used to see the sawfish, and I think there's an image that I gave to production that you could show. About 30 years ago, these used to be animals that we found in our waters, in our coastal waters. Now, if you go and ask a fisherman when was the last time that they saw a sawfish, it was about over 30 years ago. Yeah. So they're ecologically extinct in the area of Belize. If we continue to fish our sharks in this way, then we won't see any sharks in the future. And if we don't have any sharks in our waters, then we won't have a healthy reef. And if we don't have a healthy reef, we won't have the tourism that we presently have and that we presently depend on as revenue for Belize,
and
as
you can
income.
See how that shark could get easily entangled in a gill net.
Yes.
See the teeth at the end?
That's the rostrum.
So that's
yeah. So those are animals that were seen many, many years ago, and we don't find anymore here in Belize. And that's just an example of what could happen if we continue to use gill nets or if we continue to use unsustainable fishing gear.
And in this case, it's all sharks.
What's that?
That they were fishing. All the different types.
Everything
Caribbean.
that gets tangled in nets, sharks.
No, I'm talking in the images that you had with the shark.
Reef sharks,
yes,
hammerhead
we
sharks.
have hammerheads, yeah.
It's
So the final question I have really is, so what now? What can people look to in terms of making sure, people can look out and how they can lend their support to this particular initiative?
Well, we'll continue to talk about this issue. As I said, within our domain, we've been contacting fishermen. We've been, we produced a documentary. You can go and see it on our Facebook page, and several other pages have shared it. Just get involved. Find out more. Get involved. Take action. However that action takes form, but take action. This matters, and this will affect you, and affect you where you least need it, in your pocket. So please look, do your research online. Everybody has access to the internet, mobile even. So really make an effort whenever you have time to do a search. I promise the Kardashians can wait.
Well,
Yes,
Ceci?
just be informed, stay informed. We have our Facebook page, we have our website, MarAliance.org. We also have, if you need to contact us, we're available. We have a documentary as well that was developed a couple years ago. It's called Where Have Our Sharks Gone? And I believe I gave a couple copies to production. But you can always go on YouTube. You can always go to our website, type in Where Have Our Sharks Gone? And it's a documentary that won an award for the Belize International Film Festival in 2013. So I would recommend that people just stay informed, look for information, approach your NGO. I mean, people who live in the smallest communities, in the smallest towns, such as Sartene, each community has an organization that works through the conservation of whether it be terrestrial or land protection or marine. So just approach your NGO and request information.
And Tufi, I know you're talking about the Game Fish Association, but this is also critical for you as well.
Right. What we'll do is what we continue to do is to lend support. However we can, we partner with the MarAliance. When we do our tournaments, we invite them. They have scientists that come in. They do their tests, and we'll continue to do that. One of the things that the BGFA has done as well is we've completely banned catching sharks in our tournaments, so that even if you catch a shark and we see it in a boat, you're disqualified immediately. There's no points for sharks, and we actually deduct points for sharks, or we disqualify you. And we'll continue along that trend, taking conservation into mind, definitely, and partnering with Oceana and
They do
our
the
partners.
catch and release as well as in their tournaments now. So.
I know we've had them several times talking about the tournament, so we understand that. But definitely we want to thank you all for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
And
William, sorry, you have a job too, because the next time you have a fisheries-related issue on your show and we're not here, we need you to be asking the questions too. And I don't mean to be putting you on the spot,
No.
You know, the more people talking about this in set, organized, because this is not controversial, this is not confrontational, but as I said, it has to be a catalyst for change.
all right. Well, thank you once again for joining me this morning.
As well.
Thank you, William.
We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, will be to have a conversation with the embattled president of the Football Federation of Belize, Roberto Vicente. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after these messages.